Kampala. Yes, yes. It was indeed a Liberty class ship. That is a class of ship. If you're curious about a Liberty ship and you'd like to actually see one in the flesh, there's one down off of Hudson Street, downtown dock there. There's two of them there, old Liberty class. They even still have the gun emplacements on them. If you care to go down there, just go. What you do is just go west on 10th Street, and you'll cross Hudson. Just keep right on going. Then you get down to the docks there, and there's a couple of Liberty ships there. Now, the Liberty ship, yeah, I get into that. It's a very complex discussion here. That was a class of ship, of course, you realize. There's a lot of them still sailing around, the Liberty ships. Now, on the other hand, I think it's time, though, to take the bull by the horns and give you a few suggestions. Yes, yes. Take that old bull by the horns and you're liable to find yourself, by George. Have you ever taken a bull by the horns? I was out at a rodeo here a couple of months back, and I actually saw it tried. But if you didn't work either. No. Bulls are not influenced by Elsie the cow ads. They are a very different breed of cat, if I can use the... yeah. I one time saw a bull at a rodeo, a Brahma bull, go right through a wall. In fact, he went right through the side of a freight car. Boom! Out he came. Whew. And about 1,500 pounds of mean, angry gristle. They have no fat at all on them. They have a brain roughly the size of a walnut. And they have, let us put it this way, the general personality of an abscessed wisdom tooth. And so you don't go over and pet the nice bull. He's one of the most dangerous animals in the world. Did you know that? Did you know that the domestic bull is one of the single most dangerous animals in the world, and as a matter of fact accounts for more deaths every year all over the world than any other single animal? Yes, indeed. You didn't know that, did you? Well, there's a lot you guys don't know. I'm constantly reminded of that. So let's be kind here and just go trotting on. Well, we better get to work here. What I said is, let's face it, it's in times of economic distress, when people are really having problems and they're all scraping, it's time for us to leap into the breach and do a genuine public service. I'm going to give you a little tip here on how to get a job. So would you please bring on a little uplifting music. We have to uplift. This is not a DJ show, of course, at all, but it's uplift music to get you to raise your spirits or your something. What is it the English say? Bring it up. Yes, sir. All right, that's enough. I can just stand a little bit. I got a cold, and it just makes me mad when I hear that kind of stuff. Not about to stand still for that, but I had a friend one time. Yes, it's true, I did. But I had a friend one time who did something which I think could be a lesson to many of you out there who may be having trouble scratching around. That you're wondering about how to get a job, right? Wondering how it's working. It's kind of tough, right? Well, you realize, of course, that the complexity of modern organizations makes it much easier these days to relieve joblessness than in the earlier days when businesses were smaller and simpler. Now, how does it work? Well, this friend of mine one time, and this is an actual case. This is not an invented story. This guy, this buddy of mine, was out of work. he was really scratching. And he's out of work for, maybe 6 or 7 months. And when you're out of work, now I don't know whether you've ever been out of work, really out of work, but when you're out of work, one of the things that begins to happen to your head is you begin to feel that somehow you are unworthy. And furthermore, that all the other people that are working are part of a special club They've got this thing, and it's a special club, and it's a club that is so exclusive, it's almost impossible to crack into. And you get to the point where you go to Needix or something. You see this guy working on a hot plate, and you vaguely envy him, frankly envy him, because he's got a place to go. They want him there. And furthermore, he's on top of it. He's flipping those hot dogs off the grill, and he's really working. And what are you doing? Well, you're walking around faking it. And so it gets to the point where, guys, when you're out of work, you just really, you envy everybody that seems to have a job, even if they're doing something that has nothing to do with what you want to do. Because ultimately, when you're out of work, you're no longer that thing that you thought you were. If you claim that you're a copywriter and you're out of work, after about 6 months, you ain't a copywriter anymore. You're just a guy that's out of work. you know, and so ultimately, the out of workness tends to reduce all men to a basic, let's say, a basic common denominator. Just a guy walking around, getting hungrier. And so you're no longer a copywriter or a vice president or whatever the hell you are. You're a guy that's out of work, period. Now you can keep up the pretense. Oh, yes, I'm a vice president who is currently at Liberty. Well, currently at Liberty, that's going to go for a long time. So this friend of mine was out of work, and he's really scratching. And he's walking around. And he'd go to these offices, and he'd make an appointment. And he'd go up there with his sad little resume clutched in his hand. And there's always this beautiful blonde girl at the reception desk. And she's got 5 pink phones all around her. And she's reading Cosmo. And they're looking very official. And the minute your guy walks in there and he's got this little resume clutched in his hand, you know, it's almost forget it's right there. See, and he always says, "Is Mr. Bullard in? I have an appointment at 10." And who may I say is calling? And it's tell him Mr. Johnson's calling. And of course, already he's beginning to get that out of work sound in his voice. Instead of it's C.L. Johnson of the Abercrombie and Fitch Corporation. It's Charles Johnson. So she says, "1 moment, please." And she picks up the phone and hits a couple of little buttons. And she sort of whispers something in the phone. She hangs up. She says, Mr. Bullard is very sorry, but he was called out of the office, and he said for you to call back sometime tomorrow, and they may be able to set up another appointment. Forget it. Bullard's had 47 guys with those poor little hot portfolios clutched in their hands call him in 1 hour alone yesterday morning. So anyway, it got to the point where this guy was really desperate, see, because he'd go to these offices and everybody's walking around. You know, there's all kinds of people walking around. And they walk back and forth, walk around. And they got papers, and they all look very official. See, they're walking back and forth. And there he was. So he's making the rounds. This is here in Madison Avenue. See, they're making the rounds. He's going round. And it got so that he kind of knew the layout of these various places. He got to know the desk, and he got to know when this girl's day off was. And he'd once in a while actually get an appointment. And then he would be shunted off to somebody else because there was all kinds of little things going on. So one day he comes up to this office up in the 40s on Lexington Avenue. I will not tell you where it was because it may injure the guilty. So he comes up to the office there and goes up in the elevator, and he walks into the reception room. Well, now there had always been this razor-sharp, very macho girl, really on the muscle type girl sitting there who protected the portals of this company like a lioness protecting her cubs. See, but for some reason or other, she had left her desk. She was gone, and he sees these people walking around, in the back room there, where these corridors went off to the left and the right. So quick as a bunny, he just turned left, and very quickly, he looks very official. He's wearing his new suit. He's got his tie on and everything. He just walks right down the corridor and joins the general mob. It's a big office, about 12,000 people there. He joins the general mob, walking around. Now, this actually happened. At that point, he Here he's now in the back room there, and there's all kinds of people walking back and forth, and guys have got the papers, and they had a little cubby hole there where they all went in and had coffee, their own coffee machine. So he ducks into that place there, and it's free coffee. It's the company, So he's pouring himself some coffee, and the guy comes in and starts pouring coffee, and at that point he said, he said, gee, pass the cream, please. And the guy gives him the cream. He says, oh, he said, aren't you from copy approval? And he says, yes, it's true. He said, well, did you guys get that Heinz pickle thing that I sent over? He said, I believe I did. Listen, where's your office? The guy says, well, I'm at number 422 down there. He says, well, I'll come back to 422. Well, he said, I'll drop by. I check and I'll see what it's like. So the guy walks away. And about 3 minutes later, he goes ducking down to 422, and he opens the door, and he said, hey, your name's Pat, right? The guy says, yeah. He says, hey, Pat, he said, the copy's okay. The guy down there to the office will be checked out, and you'll probably get it tomorrow. He said, oh, thanks a lot. What'd you say your name was? He said, Stan. He said, okay. So he drifts on. Now he's got a little action going, see? Well, at that point, he's walking around all afternoon, see? And now he comes back out. He's there about an hour, and he's just making the scene. If you know how to walk right and you know how to look right, you can get by with a lot of this stuff, see? So he comes back walking out now. He's been there an hour, and now the girl is at her desk. So he walks up to her. He knew what her name was. Her name was Esther. He knew the name of the girl. So he's coming from in back. He says, listen, Esther, if there's any calls for me, he says, I'm going to be going down to the chalk. He said, if there's any calls for me, would you please take the message and I'll be right back? And she looks at it because she assumed he worked there now, see, because he's coming from the back. and she says, he says, I'm from copy approval. Name is Stanley Gutstop. Oh, she said, of course. She doesn't want to ever admit she didn't know. She said, of course, Mr. Gutstop, fine. I'll if anybody calls. So he goes down the stairs. See, so he goes right down the elevator. Well, now he's got a little thing going. She knows him. See, he's from whatever the hell the department is. He invented the department, by the way. So he goes down, and about 20 minutes later, he's sitting down on the chalk. See, so he goes over to the payphone and he calls the company. See, he gets Esther, of course. And he says, I want to talk to Stanley Gutstop. She says, well, Mr. Gutstop is not in. He'll be back. He says, well, can I leave a message for him? And she says, yes. He says, this is BBD&O calling, and tell him to get back to us right away. It's very important. And when he gets in, have him call, ask for Mr. Cribbage. So she said, oh, very good, sir. Yes, yes. So she writes it down. Then he runs right around the corner, goes back up the elevator. She says, oh, Mr. Gutstop, there's a message here from the BBD&O. Very important. He says, oh, thank you. Oh, I was expecting that. Thank you very much. And he takes the message, and he runs back in again. Well, I don't have to tell you how beautifully it actually worked. Now you're going to laugh at this thing, but it actually worked. And this guy hung around 3 or 4 days. He felt great because at last now he's actually in an office, and he would go in. He'd see 2 or 3 guys sitting around just shooting the breeze, and you know how they do in an office. There's little cubby holes in these ad agencies, and he would just drop in. He'd say, "Oh, hi," he got to know guys. "Hi, Stan." And the guy'd say, "Oh, hello, Howie. Yeah. Listen, what's your thoughts on this? What do you think of this? Now here. How do you like the way this layout is? Now just you haven't seen this before. Just give us your idea." And he'd look at it and say, "Not bad. Why don't you move the razor just a little bit off to the right there? It's a little bit. I think it's a little too close to the copy. Hey, that's right. That's great." And so he'd walk on down. Well, now this is an actual case it sounds to you like it's very far-fetched, but it actually happened. That he spent about a month hanging around this office of this ad agency, and he got to know every guy. I mean, they all had just assumed he was working there, because every one of these agencies has all kinds of little offices of obscure places that hardly anybody has anything to do with, like legal accounting, that kind of stuff, see. And he got to know a lot of people. And one day, he's sitting there having coffee in the lounge, and who's he having coffee with but the personnel director, who by now is Cliff. This is the guy he couldn't even get near for months, And he and Cliff are sitting there talking away. One day they're having coffee. Cliff says, listen, he said, Stan, why don't you drop by? He says, you live out in Darien, don't you? And he said, yeah. He said, listen, why don't you come by Sunday? And Marge and I are having an open house. So he said, oh, okay. And sure enough, Sunday, he and Marge dropped by. Well, a couple of days later, he just casually drops by Cliff's office. And, just to, off the record, he dropped by, and Cliff's sitting in his desk there and rejecting applicants, as he did all day long. But rejected, out, no jobs, get out, boom. And he walks in, he says, how's it going, Cliff? Cliff says, hi, Stan, how are you? Gee, he said, I really like Barbara, Marge likes her. And he says, well, she liked Marge too, good. You don't meet many people that, the empathy is there. And I just want to tell you, we had a great time Sunday. And, everything's cruel. And at that point, Cliff said, say, sit down, will you, Stan? He said, listen, Stan, there's he said, I was talking to Howie the other day. And Howie said you gave him some great ideas on that layout. And, there's an opening now in the art department, and I wonder whether or not you would consent to making a switch. I know you've been around in this job of yours for a long time, but would you mind? Really, why don't you go down and see Howie? And he says, well, come on, Cliff, for God's sakes, I'm next in line, He said, well, why don't you go down and see him? So at that point, he hot-foots it down to Howie, see? He says, hey, Howie, what's this you've been telling Cliff? He's pretending like he's mad. What are you telling Cliff, for God's sakes? Howie says, sit down, will you? Come on, Stan, listen. That we got a thing going here, and we're looking, we've been having trouble. We had, that trouble that happened with Jimmy last week, the drinking problem and all that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to ease him out. I mean, we hate to do it. And I just, we get along so great, you and me, that I just love to have you here. He says, how about it? Do you mind coming into the shop? And so he says, well, tell you how I'll give it a try. Let's tell you 6 months. And if I don't dig it, if I don't dig the scene, then I'm not sure I will. It's back to copy approval for me. Because I know the job down there, it's boring, but I know it, and what the hell, I feel kind of sorry for old Joe down there. So he says, look, okay, great. He says, I'll call Cliff. So at that point, he calls Cliff. and he goes back to see Cliff, and Cliff says, fine, sign you on there. And he goes down to Howie's office. And he's got a desk now, and it's got a lamp that swings out. And he's got a person assigned to him called My Girl. And he's got the whole bit, see. Well, then he gets a phone call from Cliff. Cliff says, hey, what the hell? Hey, listen, there's a funny thing. He said, I'm a little embarrassed here to bring this up, Stan. He said, but somebody really screwed up in this office here. We can't find your records. Stan said, what do you mean you can't find my records? He said, I can't find your records down there. I was just going to transfer you. I said, somebody lost your records. It must have been that damn fool that we had here. We had one of these, oh, for God's sakes, we had this chick working here for 2 weekends, probably threw your record. I'm very embarrassed. So he comes running down. He says, well, come on, forget it. Don't worry about it. He says, I'll just make out some new stuff. What do you want? Give me one of them applications. So he fills out the thing. He says, here, you can stick this in the record. He says, okay. And he says, real problem here. He says, because you're going to get a little more dough now that you're down in Howie's department. He says, fill out a form for the payroll too, will you? So he fills out the form. Bum, ba-dum, bum. Fait accompli. And you know that he has now been at that agency for 9 years. He is now a vice president, and I might say this, that I've changed all the names, and I'll guarantee you there's not one person in his agency knows this story. That's the first time I've ever told it on the air, because he and I were friends. And now that sounds like a real wild story, but it's an actual truth. Now, there are other ways. Do you know? I know another guy, for example. I know another guy that got himself a job, the damnedest situation, a really interesting job. He created a job in a company. He was also out of work. He created a job. Well, how did he create a job? Well, he went to work for a big sporting organization, a professional sports outfit. Because what he did, he wrote all kinds of letters to them over a period of about a year from various fake names that he had. He wrote letters to them asking them esoteric questions, and they had no record of the. In other words, it would be as if you were to write to the New York Yankees and say, "Please send me the batting average of this second baseman you had for 3 weeks in 1902," and they didn't have any record of that. And then mysteriously, you start showing up as the greatest baseball historian in the history of the world. The next thing you know, you're going to have a job. Well, this guy actually pulled that one. And are you curious what the organization was? The Indianapolis Speedway, the 500 race. This guy created a job for himself, and now he's the world's greatest expert on the 500-mile race. That one race. He can tell you every car that ever drove in it. He can tell you the name of every substitute driver who ever drove in it, how many laps each guy drove, and why they went out of the race, what mechanical failure was caused, and he can even tell you where the drivers are living today. That drove in 1918 or whatever the hell the year was. So he created a whole world. So there's a lot of ways to get a job. And the least effective way is to go and fill out an application. That doesn't work. No way. I don't know anybody that's ever gotten a job from an application. Do you? You do? You would. Well, the kind of jobs that your friends have, I can understand. I filled out an application, eh? Well, I got a job one time. I have to admit that the first job I ever really had as a kid I got filling out an application, and I regretted it instantly. I filled out this application. I don't want to tell you about that because it caused all kinds of hell at home. But that getting jobs is a sequence of events often, and getting a job can often be the worst thing that happened to you. Now that sounds hard to buy to a person who's out of work, but it just hit me the other day that many people will get a job at a certain time in their life, and usually it's when they're very young, when they're like just out of high school or college or something. And for one reason or another, they do this job, and events occur then at that point, and they never go beyond that job. And they begin to feel like there's no way they can ever get beyond that job. And they're cast into a role, and forever they stay at that role. Sure, you know that I can tell you many cases of this. I know a guy, for example, that went to school with me one time. This guy went to school with me, and when he was 16, he was a junior in high school that summer. He went down and got a job at the local supermarket, like an A&P or a food fair, one of these. It was a big supermarket. He got a job down there. And would you believe it? He is still at that supermarket his whole life. Now you'd think that he would get to be the top manager and run the whole damn thing. No, he's one of these obscure-looking little men that you see scurrying around wearing the white thing and looking harassed, and that's him. Now, had he not gotten that job, it never would have happened. Who knows what it would, where he would have wound up? Who knows? But that initial thing did it to him, and he's never changed a bit. And I've known other cases like that. That I guess a lot of people think of a job as an end in itself. Maybe that's the problem. Whereas there's other people who think of a job as a step in the direction towards a progression of things. In other words, that's the difference between having a career and having a job. Not many people have careers. Most people have jobs. And it's all in your head. You see, I think much of it has to do with what you think of what you do when you go to do it. And in short, if you get a job in the mailroom in, let's say, some big company, it's very easy to then, after 25 years, you're now the head of the mailroom. Either that, on the other hand, you could think of the jobs of the mailroom as the beginning of going entirely different directions. So I think a lot of it has to do with your attitude towards things. What you think of. I don't know how I got on this tonight, except that just about 2 days ago, I ran into a guy. It was just walking along, and I run into this guy he'd been griping for a long time. Every time I see this guy, he's always griping about his job. Oh boy, I got to get out of that shop. That place is killing me. Oh man, boy, this what a bunch of fatheads running that place. And I ran into him. I expected the same thing because I've been getting this for like 5 years from this guy. Every time I see him, it's a long tirade about this rotten joint he works. Incidentally, he's got a very important job too, you see. So I run into him. I said, "Hey, how are you, Bob?" He said, "Gee, how are you?" I said, "Okay, Bob, how about a drinky poo?" So he said, "Yeah, fine." So we're sitting there at this bar, and he's sitting there looking calm and collected. And I said, "How the hell's things going, Bob?" I always press that button, see, because that button always meant, "Oh, come on, don't ask." "Oh, God, that place is killing me, Oh, God, I can hardly wait to get out." He said, "Oh, fine." He's got this nervous voice. Fine. I said, "What do you mean, fine? This is a new line for you, Bob. This is a whole new Bob. What do you mean?" I said, "Well, Bob, let's be honest with you, Bob. You were always telling me how rotten things were going at the shop. Did you get a new job or something?" "Well, what do you mean?" "Why, things are going fine at the shop." And then it hit me. Bum, ba-dum, bum. The change in the economy. All of a sudden now, he loves his job. Oh, wow. Yes, indeed. A hungry man, a starving man, in fact, enjoys crusts of bread. Bum, ba-dum, bum. Trulement. Have you ever looked back on all the jobs you had, as back to the very earliest days of your youth? I'm talking about even your sub-youth, the jobs you've had. The one job that I look back on with absolute warm digging is a job that I had when I was, I was 14, in fact. 14. Yeah, I was just about going from a high school freshman to a sophomore. You're 14, right? So it was that summer I got a job with a guy I have always remembered. It was like getting a job with Abraham Lincoln. It would be roughly like getting a job with Gary Cooper. This guy had a curious, steely-eyed, bronzed, high cheekbone dignity, and he was a civil engineer, and he wore Stetson hats, and I was hired along with another kid. We were chain men. You know what a chain man is? Well, you know what a surveyor is. Well, he was a surveyor. He was actually a civil engineer, but he was doing major surveying work, and we were working along a lot of rivers, laying out the riverbank projects and things, working through swamps. And very exciting work, really. And we were chain men. We would chain men. I can describe what you do. With the steel tape and the chain and the red and white pins and all that, and the transit, and that summer was really a great summer because this guy had I even remember his name. He had a certain great dignity. It was like, and he had a curious wildness about him too, like as if he should have had a horse, and we would wade through this swamp water and carry all this equipment back in there. And then once in a while when we'd have lunch, we always carried our lunch because we were thousands of miles away from any kind of civilization in this job. He would tell us stories about when he was surveying for the railroad in the jungles of Yucatan. Wow. He was and me and this other kid, there was another kid from another school, and we'd sit there and he'd tell us stories about the Yucatan jungles, and then he'd tell us about how this coming fall he was going up to Alaska to do some special work for a corporation that was building some kind of a big suspension bridge, And he really did it. That's the thing. He actually did all this stuff. And he had this battered old Jeep-like car. It was a battered old Jeep that he always used for he carried his equipment around. It had all kinds of water cans on the side. It had special cans of gas and oil that he carried with him. He had big machetes that he used and stuff. Wow. And what a fantastic summer. And I came damn near becoming a civil engineer because of that, because it really turned me on. And I remember coming home, and at that point, I'm covered with mosquito bites, and I'm deeply bronzed because of my summer out in the swamp. And yeah, we even had a brush with a rattler, tremendous big rattlesnake that took a strike at the other kid, didn't get him, and missed him. That's something you never see in movies, that often a rattler will miss. You keep thinking they always hit when they strike, but no, he missed. And boy, he just struck like a shot, just like that. And this great big timber rattler. This is one of the wilder rattlers. Of course, the diamondback and the timber rattler. And he took a shot at this kid, and it was great to see the surveyor. He says, "Don't move, freeze." He knew he dealt with snakes for years, and zapped the old machete. And that was the end of the snake. And I remember coming home and look at my old man. See, that was the first time that I ever really looked at my old man. He's sitting there reading his sport page and yelling about the White Sox. and I thought to myself, oh, God, And I kept thinking of would Mr. Millard be like, does he care about the White Sox? Does he sit around and read the sport page and eat meatloaf? You forget it. He was always eating emergency rations in his dugout canoe in Guatemala. So, you must have had exciting jobs like that in your past, huh? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's right. That was you're talking about the time at the Shell station, right? I see. Yeah, that was very exciting. Yes. I told you, this show is dedicated to public service. And there's going to be all kinds of stowaways now sneaking around in various offices tomorrow morning. Guys pretending that they're working at the mimeograph department, trying to look innocent. But it works. At least it gives you something to do. Oh, yeah. Why, many a big company has traveled for years with stowaways aboard. They're like giant ships at sea. And nobody's the wiser. You can even eat at the captain's table if you work it right. Listen, you don't think I'm Shepherd, do you? I took over that loud show 5 years ago. Just shoved them right out, took over, and that's it. You haven't heard Shepherd for 5 years. Hey, George, nothing's real.